Indeed. Ben Habib is here, former MEP, of course. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, I can't help but now see the Labour government in that format as a sort of circus troupe with the adoring children sitting in the front row waiting for something magical to happen, but it all goes horribly wrong, and either the tent collapses or the elephants die or something. But there's nothing going on, is there? I mean, this idea that somehow growth is all going to be completely and utterly cemented into this country by building a third runway at Heathrow that won't actually be ready until 2050. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Well, it's the first time I've actually seen the Labour Party performing performative politics, making promises that they know they can't keep. And I think she's done it deliberately. She's done it so that she can give people the impression that she's not that green, for one, and that she's going to drive growth, that over the heads of Ed Miliband and other people in her cabinet, she's going to put this third runway in. It's going to make, put Heathrow back on the map as one of the biggest airports in the world, and so on and so forth. And it's all performative because she knows she's not going to have to do it. But she'll be able to wrap herself in the cloak of a so-called growth agenda, while absolutely knowing all the time that all it is, as you say, a circus act. And it's quite clever, really, because we're all talking about it. It's taken our eyes away from the huge damage she's done to the economy already.
Yeah.
I mean, if she was really serious about growth, she'd reverse the increase in employers' national insurance. She wouldn't go through with the employment rights bill that she's going through. She wouldn't go through with the rent reform bill that would, damage her ownership and so on. She wouldn't go through with the new law that they're bringing in for businesses to keep an account of the ethnicity wage gap, which is going to burden businesses even more and make employment even more difficult. There's so many things she could do which would cost the government nothing and would reduce costs and boost business. Yeah. She's not doing any of those. She targets something which she knows she can't deliver.
Yeah. It is remarkable, isn't it? You're right. I mean, it is all a distraction because, I mean, I can't quite believe how much obsession has been placed upon this whole idea of a third runway at Heathrow. I mean, I've got messages coming in from all parts of Britain saying, nobody cares about Heathrow Airport. If you live in Scotland, what goes on at Heathrow matters not a jot. And, I mean, for an awful lot of people, airports in London don't mean anything. I mean, I think if they were suddenly to expand it, that would be one thing. But, I mean, can you imagine the chaos? This country can't even put, the HS2 project together, because the bats, they cost them something like £100 million extra to create a bat tunnel because they were worried they were killing a few bats on the way to putting a train service in. She's now going to build a train service between Oxford and Cambridge, who absolutely nobody will want to use. I mean, everybody knows if you go to Oxford, you don't go to Cambridge. If you go to Cambridge, you don't go to Oxford. What's the point of a bloody train line running between the two cities?
Absolutely right. And, talk about saving money. She could perhaps not buy new shoes and new clothes for illegal migrants who entered the country.
Can you believe that?
That would save a bit of money. And
I mean, that is the final kind of ignominy, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, after everything that we've heard, after all the nonsense about legal aid and lawyers that they get given, hotel rooms that they get given, food that they get given, credit cards they can use, phones that they get given for free, we now find out we're actually kitting them out with lots of designer gear because they might be a bit wet from the trip. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And we have, moving on to the migrant thing, we now have a playbook which we can adopt in this country. Donald Trump has set it out for us. Right. If France won't take these people back to France, which is where they came from, well, then we should impose sanctions on France. I know people listening will go, well, Ben, how can you impose sanctions on France? Well, I'll tell you how we do it. We remove all the fishing licenses for their boats that come into our water with our consent to take our fish. Right. Often killing a hell of a lot more than they need, abusing the environmental integrity of British waters, abusing us, therefore, taking back these fish. And here we are taking these migrants. Instead of paying the French the thick end of £1 billion, which is what we've done, trying to cajole them into stopping these illegal migrants crossing the channel, take strong action. Say, sod you.
Right. Well, as you say, take
know.
a leaf out of Donald Trump's book when he dealt with Colombia, somewhere between the 6th hole and the 8th hole down at Mar-a-Lago, when they said they weren't going to take any of his migrants back. You know, you say to them, how about this? We'll put 25% tax levy, a tariff on all the wine and champagne that you export to the UK. And I'm pretty sure they would sit up and take notice of that. But of course, we won't do that because there'll be somebody sitting in the Department of Trade going, oh, but they might charge us 25% if we export things to Europe. Well, good. Let them do it. And then, you know, we can make more of our relationships with the United States of America.
Well, absolutely, Mike. And you can't put a price on the protection of this country.
No.
And what we're seeing is an assault of the United Kingdom, effectively by France, because it's the French who allow these people to cross the channel unchecked.
Yeah.
We're seeing an assault on our country, and our country's security has to come first.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I'd just say is that we run, and we still run, a £100 billion deficit with the European Union every year. That means the trade for the European Union with Britain is much more important to them than it is to us. They're running the surplus. So let's impose tariffs on them if they won't get a grip of their own borders, and they won't. I mean, for example, they should get rid of the Schengen zone. Germany is waking up to the need for that. France should wake up to the need for that. The EU should wake up for the need to that. And if they don't wake up to it, impose tariffs.
Yeah.
Cease doing trade. Take back fishing licenses. Be aggressive. Be aggressive. Don't be timid and taking the knee perpetually to these powers who are damaging British interests.
Of course. But what we now know about Keir Starmer is that he thinks the answer to everything is to change the law. You know, because he's a lawyer. I mean, the idea that we're going to sort of suddenly see changes in the way that people decide to enter the country illegally because you make it more illegal is a joke. I mean, they're coming here already because it's illegal.
So
they don't care about the law. I mean, I'm reading a story here. It says Labour's landmark law to tackle the small boats crisis will retain the ban on migrants claiming modern slavery protections, the powers to detain child migrants, and a string of other controversial measures that the party previously strongly opposed. It doesn't matter. You might as well say, you know, if you're part of the Labour government, you know, everybody who comes in here illegally is going to be painted yellow because you know they won't do it. It just won't happen. You know, we were speaking to one of our listeners who left a voice note earlier who said, you know, that everything that they do, they don't, and they say they're going to do things, but they don't actually do them. You know, I've said before, everything they promise to do, they don't do, and then everything they do, they promise not to do.
I mean, you could sort illegal migration out. Perhaps not overnight, but you could sort it out very quickly with three things. One, the imposition of sanctions on countries that allow the trade of people in the way that they are and coming across the channel. Secondly, a policy of detaining and deporting all those that come to this country illegally. And if we can't deport them, they remain incarcerated until we can deport them.
Right.
And then thirdly, actually stopping people crossing the channel.
Yeah.
Get a dedicated force in the channel like the Belgians have, a force that uses fast boats, well-trained people, drones, sensors, all that sort of thing, barricades, and stop these dinghies and say, no, go back to France. So physical action, punitive action on those countries who allow the trade to continue, and then take a criminal justice approach to those that have entered our country illegally. Right. And it would stop. It would stop, wouldn't it, Mike?
Of course it would. I mean, look at this. Keir Starmer will unveil new counter-terrorism-style powers to target people smugglers, including plans to seize mobile phones and financial assets. Well, hang on. Yeah. We give them mobile phones when they land. So what's the point of seizing them once they've already thrown them into the sea? It then goes, border force officers will also be authorised to stop and search migrants arriving in small boats. Well, why aren't we searching them now? You know, they could be bringing all sorts of, contraband with them. They could be smuggling drugs. They could have some kind of explosives on them. Why are we not searching these bloody people as soon as they walk off the boat?
Well, they themselves shouldn't be on that boat. You know, they are the contraband. The illegal migrants are the contraband. Yeah. They shouldn't be allowed in the country. Yeah. That's it, full stop.
We've got, people like J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America, who says, if you're a criminal, basically, and you come into our country, we want to kick you out. We don't want you. He said, I don't want you in my country. And very cleverly, they basically said, the White House press secretary, the new one, said, they're all criminals because they've entered the country illegally. Doesn't matter what else they do. Because they've entered the country illegally, they are immediately called a criminal. And that way you can kick them out.
And that's what Suella Braverman had tried to do with her Illegal Migration Act. Right. When she crafted the bill, it was called the Illegal Migration Act. And anyone who entered the country illegally would be denied asylum. The Secretary of State was required to detain them. and then required to make efforts to deport them. And when the bill became an act, instead of the Secretary of State being obliged to do all of that, the wording was diluted down, and it gave the Secretary of State the right to do it. So from going, it went from being a strong act to being an incredibly weak one.
Right.
And that is symptomatic of our government, an inability to actually do what's right. Suella Braverman had exactly the right idea. And then as it went through the processes, through the Commons and so on, it became a pointless act. And so we see no one being detained and deported under the Illegal Migration Act. Do you remember? It came with such fanfare, that act.
Well, according to her critics, she was basically using the language of the 1930s, and they were trying to make out that she was some kind of Nazi sympathiser. And this country is riddled with absolute and utter numpties who don't even seem to understand the damage that's being done to the country by their policies.
And one of the things that I'm working on now is actually shifting that Overton window so that speaking common sense isn't regarded as politically unacceptable.
Yeah.
What Donald Trump said on his first day as president when he announced those various policies, the vast majority of British citizens, by the way, support those policies.
They do.
But our politicians feel scared of simply talking about some of them.
Yeah.
We wouldn't get politicians saying they want to abolish DEI. We don't get politicians, with the exception of a handful, who say they want to ditch net zero.
Right.
We don't get politicians, with the exception of a handful, who say they want to enforce our borders. All of this is basic good governance. Do the right thing. So I'm working on an initiative to actually move the Overton window to a position where our politicians more broadly have the cover required to feel comfortable saying what it is that Donald Trump is actually doing. And I hope that with the more he does, the more comfortable we and our...
That's what I hope will happen as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you move the Overton window far enough towards me, I might just hurl myself out of it. But let's have a look at Donald Trump and what he's actually saying about migrants. Check this out.
I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
Brilliant. I mean, it brings a smile to your face, isn't it? We're just going to send them to Guantanamo and leave them there. There's no question of what happens to them when they get there. They're just going to die there, probably.
I mean, Guantanamo has a great reputation for being a blooming awful place, doesn't it? And so he's using it effectively. He's saying, you come here, you commit criminal activity, you're going to Guantanamo, buddy.
And by contrast, here's some breaking news from our government. Right? Ofcom has said that it is proposing to scrap second-class post deliveries on Saturdays and reduce the service to be on alternate weekdays. Brilliant.
Yeah,
well, that's all right,
and that's the breakdown of the British economy.
Yeah,
that's
there we
symptomatic. And we're going to get much more of that, Mike, aren't we?
Yeah.
As we run out of money, local councils, by the way, just a quick statistic, in 2024 lost £2.5 billion in aggregate, forecast to go up to £9.5 billion by 2026. We are going bust. And Rachel Reeves is fiddling, or playing a fiddle or fiddling, either will do, while we go bust.
Yeah. She really is. It's shocking to see. Ben, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Habib, former MEP there.